the parable of the sower. There are three things about it that grab me, and they have to do with the three components of the parable. The first is the sower. The sower, of course, Jesus lets us know, is God. And the thing about the sower that is astounding is the incredible abundance with which the sower sows. The sower is indiscriminate on where the seed goes, is ungrudging about putting it in places that may not yield much. You might even say is wasteful, but is hopeful. This sowing of the seed happens everywhere. And when we think about this as a parable, that means it happens to everyone, and it happens to all of us at different points of our lives. It happens to us when we are on paths without anything to grow. It happens when we are in thorns. It happens when we are in rocky places, and it happens when we have an abundant soil ready to yield. At all points in our lives and to all people, the sower abundantly spreads out this seed, abundantly. The next thing, the next character, if you will, in this parable is the seed. There is something that I wrote on a little Post-it, and it's been sometime in the past 2 years, and what it said was, the life force in seeds buried in the ground. And that phrase grabbed me, and I wrote it down on this little Post-it because I knew that someday I was going to need it. It has been, my desk is usually a disaster. This past week, the person who helps me sometimes came by to help me tidy it up, and she showed me this little post. I said, no, we have to keep that. Again. And I thought, this is it. The thing about the seed is this potential. The seed is this life force buried in the ground. That's what this seed is. It is the potential for each of us to have wholeness in our lives. That's what that seed that is being spread out is. That's what the yield of this faith is this potential for a whole life. And then we have the soil. We have the path where the birds removed it. The birds, of course, are referred to the evil one in the description that Jesus gives to his disciples about the parable. We have the rocky path where it sprouted but had no roots. We had the thorns where there were anxious concerns and acquisitive greed that interfered with the true yield. And we had the favorable soil. So one of the things that I was very conscious of about this parable was how it was spoken by someone who lived in a desert. I grew up in Arizona, and so I know about gardening in a desert. And it's really different from gardening here. Because frankly, seed grows everywhere here. On the paths, in rocky fields, among thorns. We do not have the same issues with growth in an environment like Vermont as one did in the desert. Jesus was dealing with a really different environment than ours, a really different environment. So, bearing that in mind, and yet still, as a gardener, I know how important it is to care for the soil. That if you want the things that you want to grow well, to do so, you have to take care of the soil. You have to make sure it is built in a way that it's not going to wash away to the extent you are able, something we know from this week many farmers were not able to do. You have to amend it with composted manure, with compost, with whatever it is that your soil needs. You have to plant at the right times. You need to make sure there's water appropriately and that it has good drainage. So taking care of the soil takes a lot of time and effort. And that for me is the message about this, is that if you want a good yield, it takes time and effort. You cannot just rest on your laurels, even in a place like Vermont where things grow abundantly. It takes time and effort. This week, our state and counties have dealt with devastating flooding. Devastating. There were times when I felt like Noah. Just the rain kept coming. I'm on a high ground, so my home was not affected. My son was stuck in Morrisville overnight, and when he finally was able to get home, it took him 5 hours to do a trip that normally takes half an hour from Morrisville. Took him 5 hours, going through back roads, being turned back around, and we have an electric car, so he had to be judicious because he couldn't run out of power before. But he did it. He got home. We were both really happy. But when I drove here from Walden in Wolcott, the difference between the cornfields in Wolcott and the cornfields here was astounding. I got to, near Stone, I thought, oh, look, this corn is sprouting, because in Wolcott, they are flattened. Massive cornfields are flattened that were by the river. The devastation is extensive, and it's going to take a lot to, get through. So I encourage us all to use this as an opportunity to reach out to others in need. Not with something that you think is a good idea, but with something that the other person needs. So that means you need to listen. As Jesus told us twice in this parable, listen. Listen to where the need is. And we as a church will try to keep you informed about what those needs are and how you can help with hands, with money. And even, I had someone who was affected yesterday, yes, it was yesterday. And she said, even if you can't help me, if someone could just text me some words of comfort. And I thought, I can do that. I can text words of comfort. And that is what I did. So there are many different ways of helping people. But you need to base that help on their need and not on what you think they need. I say unto you, be exuberant in reaching out to others in faith. Be nurturing of the faith growing within you. And be vigilant in preparing spaces for faith to grow. Amen.